But, you know, I know that you know what I know. He's an extraordinary organizer, okay, without a doubt, okay? And he's dedicated and committed to the struggles for working class people. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you, and I never get his last name right. I think it's some phonic deficit that I have. But I call him Tony P. And he makes my heart burst with pride because I've known him, like I said, for a long time and worked with him. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Tony P., who will introduce our keynote speaker.
Well, thank you, Z. You know, Z refuses to say my last name. And I feel a little sympathy for Z today because I have a hard time with Chris's last name. So I'm usually not in that situation. But anyways, before I actually introduce Chris, I actually wanted to take a couple of seconds and ask everybody in the room here to just look around. Look at the crowd here. Look at the diversity in this crowd. There are very few places where you can see this kind of diversity. Young, old, black, white, gay, straight, labor, community. Give yourselves a round of applause. It's pretty unique. I also want to take a couple of seconds and thank all of the volunteers that made this breakfast happen. I don't know if everyone knows, but this is an entirely volunteer organized breakfast. So thank you to all the volunteers. In fact, I'm going to ask all of you to collectively remind me this time next year to not ask the volunteers to be here at 7 in the morning because we just don't need to be here that early. So collectively remind me not to do that and to apologize again next year if I do ask them to be here this early. Real quickly, I want to introduce Chris. You know, I've introduced a lot of keynote speakers for this breakfast, but it actually really makes me especially proud and happy to introduce Chris as our keynote speaker this year because he's a young guy. He's a young person, and there's not enough young people taking the types of leadership roles in the labor movement and in community organizing. And so we really need to recognize young people when they do step up and go above and beyond the call of duty for working people. And so that's one thing I wanted to recognize is the fact that Chris is 33. I'm 35, so I guess I'm 2 years senior. But one thing I also want to recognize is Chris comes from an auto worker family. I come from an auto worker family also. My grandfather worked at Chrysler for 30 plus years. My father worked at Chrysler before he went into the Navy. And so I think we share a lot in common in that regard too. And the struggles that the auto workers and other union workers have gone through over the years with the decimation of our industrial infrastructure. So, real briefly, before I read the bio, I really don't know Chris that well. I actually only met him one other time in Detroit. We sat down for breakfast one morning and got a chance to get to know each other and talk a little bit. And then yesterday we went around the city and I introduced him to some folks. We went and met with Bob Soutier and Nancy and Laura and some other folks. And one of the things that struck me about Chris as we were having all these conversations with everybody was Chris really listens. So not only is he a young guy, but he listens. And there's not a lot, sometimes we need to step back and take time to listen and learn from folks. And Chris is one of the folks, one of the guys, just strikes me as someone that really listens to people. And so that's actually something we don't have in common because I'm not real good at listening. I try, but anyways, I know no one came here to hear me talk, so I'm going to read this thing real fast, and then we'll have Chris come up. Chris Michalakis served as president of the Metro Detroit AFL-CIO Central Labor Council. Prior to his current position, Chris served as the Metro COC Secretary-Treasurer and worked for the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 876 as their statewide legislative and political director. He serves on the board of Progress Michigan and on the advisory board of the Restaurant Opportunity Center of Michigan, and is also active in the Michigan Alliance for Immigrant Rights and the Trade Union Leadership Council. At 33, Chris is the youngest serving Central Labor Council president of a major metropolitan area and firstborn born. He is a graduate of the University of Michigan and a part-time graduate student at Wayne State. Chris's father is an active member of the United Auto Workers and his mother a social worker. In addition, Chris pays dues to a number of other organizations, the NAACP, ACLU, the American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association, CLU, United Latinos of the UFCW, Pride at Work, A. Philip Randolph, UFCW Minority Coalition, and is a member of the Nativity of the Virgin Mary Greek Orthodox Church. So without further ado, let's welcome Chris.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to thank Tony for that great introduction. He was such a great host yesterday, taking me around to meet. You guys have some really great labor leaders here in St. Louis, and you ought to be very proud. And it's funny, back home in Detroit, I've had a few friends move out this way, and they all say really great things about the progressive community here. And I was telling Tony, I said, when we do events like this back home, it's half the size and they're twice as old. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I always, you can learn a lot from the gray-haired folks of our movement. But I just want to thank Tony and recognize him for all the hard work he's done putting this event together. And I also want to congratulate all of this year's awardees. I know you guys have a great progressive community here, so to be recognized as a leading activist in a town with so much great activism has to be a very, very big honor. So I was asked here to come and talk about right to work, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I'm a labor leader in America's newest right to work state, Michigan, of all places. And I want to talk a little bit about how we got here. 2010 was a brutal election all over the country. We saw the rise of the Tea Party, and really quickly, I was watching a special last night on HBO about the, anti-immigrant nationalist party of Greece and how horrible it was and how they make up 10% of the Greek parliament. And I was thinking, well, our anti-immigrant nationalist party has a majority in our Congress. But, that's just my opinion. So not only did we see the rise of the Tea Party, but we saw Republicans winning control of gubernatorial offices, control of Congress, as well as a lot of state legislatures. And in Michigan, like a lot of other places in the Midwest, the Republicans controlled everything. The House, the Senate, the governor's office, and the state Supreme Court, which, by the way, in Michigan is elected, which is very strange. So you see the Midwest as being part of the GOP's new strategy, similar to the Southern strategy of the 60s. You have, and the reason for this is electoral math. Traditional red strongholds like Texas and Colorado and even Arizona have these growing Latino populations. And every day, more and more immigrant families like mine, who have been here for years, raising their families, running businesses, are becoming eligible for citizenship. And as immigrant families become citizens, they become eligible to vote. I'll never forget in 1988, I was 8 years old and still fresh off the boat, as us Greeks say. I remember C-SPAN and CNN being on all the time, and I was upset at my parents because I could never watch cartoons. But my whole family was excited about the possibility of a Dukakis presidency. And it was funny, I actually, am one of the few people who can say Michael Dukakis is the reason why I'm in politics. But, as an immigrant family, we were empowered and engaged, and so I really sympathized in 2008 when African Americans were empowered and engaged to see Barack Obama do a lot better than Michalakis. And so, because immigrant families like mine are becoming citizens and becoming voters, they become a political force. So Republicans have a choice. They can either, heaven forbid, adapt to changing demographics and accept immigrants in their party ranks. And it's funny to watch them try to do this from time to time too, by the way. If you ever get a chance in any Republican circles to watch them try to make immigrants feel welcome. They can do this, or they can make new red states to make the electoral math work. And that's what they're doing. That's why Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri, that's why these states are so important. So how do you make a red state? Well, the Democratic Party has a lot of base voters, and the Republicans seem to like to go out of their way to suppress all of our different bases. We see them suppressing women's rights, suppressing LGBT rights, and in order to make a red state, you need to suppress the rights of African Americans and union members. One of the first things Governor Snyder did when he got elected, it was actually literally the fourth thing he did, Public Act 4, is he signed into law the legalization of local dictators. They call them emergency managers. And the law states that these emergency managers can be implemented into a municipality or a school board and literally do anything they want. And their only oversight is to the state treasurer, who's not elected. So these emergency managers have the authority to break union contracts, privatize all the city services, fund and underfund departments, merge services, give themselves ridiculous salaries, literally do whatever they want in municipal government. And where do you think we find these emergency managers? Any guesses? 50% of African Americans in the state of Michigan do not have a locally elected government. Virtually every single majority-minority city in Michigan has a local dictator instead of a mayor or a city council. This means that these local city clerks don't have the resources they need to conduct their elections. It means the wait time in cities like Detroit, which are already 3 hours long in some precincts, become longer. And I hate to think how things go from here. So right off the bat, Governor Snyder found a way to suppress the African American vote, as in Michigan we're entering a scary new era of Jim Crow. I think that topic alone I could talk about for hours. I know you want me to talk about right to work, so I'll move on. What about union members now? So the GOP has a multi-pronged strategy to go after union workers. First, they can just eliminate union membership altogether, especially in the public sector. The local dictator law I just talked about is aimed at getting rid of unions in the city of Detroit, which has a very, very large unionized workforce, and in other cities, while they pass all these other laws on education reform that expand charter schools and restrict public schools. What they've done in Detroit public schools is just criminal. They've really created an environment where the Detroit public school system can't compete with charter schools. They don't get the resources they need to compete. And the charter schools are becoming more and more prominent, and you actually have the local dictator, the emergency manager of the Detroit public school system, purposely helping charter schools at the cost of hurting public schools. So the remaining unionized teachers that are in the public school system now, they were under assault as well, not like we saw in Wisconsin. Rather than take away their right to collectively bargain, we took away what they can bargain about. So in Michigan, you're not allowed to bargain if you're a teacher on things like just cause. That's gone. Healthcare premiums are mandated by the legislature, set at 20%. Classroom sizes are mandated. There are classrooms in Detroit public schools that are 60 students crammed into a classroom built for 30. You can't bargain on retirement security. So they're trying to weaken the union's ability to bargain for the workers that are left in the school system. As for the rest of the workforce, the way they try to cut down on union membership is, of course, right to work. Right to work means, just by definition, less union members across the state. So, 2010, the Republicans win control of everything, and we start hearing that right to work is coming. The Chamber of Commerce is just, happier than I don't even know what. I'm trying to be clean. So the very first thing when Governor Snyder gets elected, the press starts hounding him. What are you going to do about right to work? Are you going to pass right to work? And Snyder said, I don't want to touch right to work. It's not on my agenda. Luke, how many times did we hear that? Not on my agenda. And the way the rest of the politics worked in Michigan, the House was swept by a tidal wave of Tea Party supporters. And so the Tea Party controlled all the new freshman Republicans. They elected a Tea Party Speaker of the House. But in the Senate, they elected as leader a moderate Republican senator who would tell his union, who was supported by unions often, he would say, right to work will pass over my dead body. That was the Randy Richardville's quote. And I honestly think that Governor Snyder and Senator Richardville were being honest to themselves, and in their minds, honest to us when they said these things. What Senator Richardville didn't realize is that if he didn't pass right to work over his dead body, that could be arranged. And while right to work might not have been on the agenda of Governor Snyder, it was on the agenda of all of the funders of the GOP, people like Dick DeVos, the Koch brothers, and also the national GOP that needs to enact this Midwest strategy. Do you guys all know who Dick DeVos is? I like to pick on him a lot. He is for those of you that don't know, he is the heir to the Amway fortune. And no offense if there's any Amway salespeople in here, but it's, I don't think, the most honest corporation in the world. But he tried to run for governor and he failed. So rather than run for governor, he tried to buy himself one. So, you see people like Dick DeVos, like the Koch brothers. I hear you guys even have someone here named Rex Springfield. Yeah, Dick DeVos is our Rex Springfield. These are all corporate people, right? And corporate CEOs, they don't make donations to causes. They don't donate to a party. They make investments. And when you invest in a candidate, when you invest in a party, you expect a return on your investment, an ROI, though I'm sure you're all familiar with that term. And that's what scares me about the Republican Party today in Michigan and all across the country, is their funders have so much control over their investments, i.e. their politicians, that even in a union state like Michigan, where we have a history of moderate Republicans, George Romney was not like his son. He's the one who signed the bill into law to allow public sector employees to unionize. We've had moderate governors, Republican governors for years. Some would even call them progressive Republicans. And even in a state like Michigan, a big labor state, where 2 of the 3 heads of the legislative process publicly said they didn't want to touch right to work, the funders still got what they wanted. And here in Missouri, I hear things are going really well, and I'm really excited to hear that. And it sounds like you have a lot of good, supportive Republicans. But you can't get too comfortable and you can't let up the fight. Because no matter what your Republican allies say to you, I'm sure when they tell you, I'm with you on right to work, I'm 100% not gonna override the governor's veto, I'm sure they're being honest with you and they mean it. But what you have to think about is what's gonna happen when Rex Springfield or the Koch brothers personally call them up, personally say, if you don't vote this way, you're gonna have a primary, and personally stand on the floor of the House to pump everybody up and really make sure all the Republicans are towing the party line, which is exactly what Dick DeVos did. He came on, we weren't allowed inside the House the day right to work passed. They locked us out. Dick DeVos somehow got in and got on the floor and was literally shaking the hands of every single Republican that walked in there today, making sure they towed the party line. So, where do we go from here in Michigan? I think the next few election cycles are really important, and it would be great if we can win back majorities in all these bodies and overturn the law. But when you think about it, it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of resources to win back control of the House, the Senate, the governor's office, and even the Supreme Court. So maybe we can do these things in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. But what I am trying to encourage folks in Michigan to do is, what if we spent all that time and energy organizing our own shop floors? What if we spent all that time with our stewards and our staff and our rank and file members and got them so well trained and so much more engaged that it didn't matter whether or not we became a right to work state? Now, we're hearing in Indiana, membership is only dropping 10, 20%. And a lot of unions will say, that's something we can live with, we can still get on, but that's still gonna hurt us a little bit. We'd rather not have to lose 10, 20% of our revenue rather than lose it. But what if we got so good at organizing that it didn't matter if we became right to work, that we take this weapon out of the Republicans' arsenal? What if we started building community alliances so strong that the public backed us up whenever we had workplace struggles, where whenever we went to fight for a contract, we had the community there with us? You guys, by the way, have an amazing jobs with justice team here that I'm jealous of, that I met with some of your leaders yesterday, and you have that relationship. So what if other right-to-work states learn how to do this? One thing I really wanted to focus on when I became president of our CLC, and one thing I learned a lot of at UFCW, was the importance of community relationships. Our CLC, I'm proud to say, was either the first or the second in the country to pass a resolution in support of comprehensive immigration reform. Granted, as an immigrant, I was very motivated to do this, but all of that organizing we did around the immigration issue really paid off for us when the right to work fight was happening, because now all those immigrant groups we were working with were now there for us. We were there for them, they were there for us. The same thing happened with the LGBT community. For years, we've been working on their issues and pushing for marriage equality. And one thing I learned throughout the whole right to work fight is when you strengthen collective bargaining, it doesn't only just give economic security to the LGBT community like it does everybody else, but it's also the most effective way to fight against workplace discrimination. So we built these strong relationships, and it sounds like you guys are doing a great job of that here, but what if we continued to do this in this era of right to work and became stronger and became a more powerful movement? Yesterday, I was very, very proud to get an email from the president of AFT Michigan. They won their second organizing fight in 2 months. We've had right to work for 2 months. So since we've become a right to work state, AFT has organized 800 new union members. Half of them in charter schools.
Wow.
Yeah. So even in an era of right to work, we can win fights. We can win battles. And I really think that we should work to make right to work an irrelevant law. And I say all this because, pardon the pun here, I would like to see this crisis of right to work in Michigan become an opportunity for us. I shouldn't say pun, more corporate cliche. The right wing celebrated when Michigan fell and became a right to work state, and I want them to regret that that happened. Everything that I've seen here the last couple of days in Missouri, you guys are moving in that direction. In fact, you're probably a little further off than we were at this point of our fight. You're building these great community relationships. You're organizing your members. You're really doing great things. And I really do believe that you will win this battle. But if you don't, it won't be because of your hard work. It won't be because of your efforts. If for some strange reason, right to work becomes the law in Missouri, I want you all to realize that that's just the beginning of a broader. You may lose that battle, you may win that battle, but you will win the war for workers' rights and for economic security. With that, thank you for your time.